Hello and welcome to our presentation on Introduction to Supported Decision-Making. My name is Jonathan Martinez and I'm honored to be working with the Parent Education Advocacy Training Center, PEDC, on this presentation. Today we're going to talk about my favorite topic, supported decision-making, something that I think is the greatest advance for people with disabilities since the Americans with Disabilities Act, a way for you to help your loved ones be as independent as possible and lead their best lives. But before we begin, I want to talk to you about something we don't often think a lot about, our rights. Think about your rights. Think about your favorite rights, the ones that make you the proudest to be an American, a Virginian, a human being. Things like freedom of speech and religion, freedom of elections, freedom of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now think about what they all have in common. Choice, right? All of our rights come down to choice. Freedom of speech is the right to choose what to say and what not to say. Freedom of religion is the right to choose how and where and even whether we worship. Elections are the rights to choose the people who will govern us. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness is the way we choose to live our lives. There's a great quote on your screen right now from the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. And what he says is so correct. We are our choices. Each and every one of us are the sum total of the choices we make. The good ones, the bad ones, the silly ones, the significant ones, they all add up to create the human beings we are. So what I say is my favorite right is the right to make choices. Clinically, that's called self-determination. It's a fancy word you're going to hear a lot. I'm sure you already know. But when you hear that phrase, self-determination, I want you to think about making choices because the scientists, the researchers, they describe self-determination as being causal agents, the people who do things, people who are self-determined make decisions instead of having decisions made for them. They do things instead of having things done to them. They are the causal agents in their lives. And what we know from 40 years of studies, from study after study after study, is that people with disabilities, particularly people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, who are more self-determined, who make more choices, have better lives. We know from decades of studies that people with disabilities who are more self-determined and make more choices are more likely to be independent, employed, better educated, healthier, happier, more community integrated, and safer. But here's another thing to think about. Those rights that are so important to you, would they be worth anything if you weren't allowed to use them? If I was to say to you, yes, you have the freedom of speech, but you're only going to talk when I tell you to, and you're only going to say what I let you. Would that be a right? If I was to say to you, yes, you could vote if I take you to the polls, and then you will only vote for who I tell you to, would that be a right? Of course not. Without choice, our rights don't mean anything. But that's exactly what we've been doing to people with disabilities for literally 1,000 years. See, the very first time we had rights in the Western world was in a book called the Justinian Code. An emperor in ancient Rome 1,500 years ago named Justinian got all the laws together in one place called the Justinian Code. It was the first time they put all the laws and all the rights together in one book. Do you know what one of those laws said? It said that if you are feeble-minded, and that was their word for people with disabilities, you had to have a curator over you to do things for you and in your place and make decisions instead of you. In other words, the very first time in the Western world where people had rights, there was a way to take them away from people with disabilities. And that started what I think is a culture or an expectation that people with disabilities should lose their rights or have to lose their rights. It has followed us for 1,500 years. In the Middle Ages in Britain, which is where we got most of our laws, they updated the Justinian Code. What they said then was that if you were an idiot or a lunatic, and that was their words for people with disabilities, you had to have a committee over you to exercise your rights in your place and make decisions for you. We've just called that in the US guardianship. Now, before I go on another second, I want to say something and make it very clear. I'm not here to say, and no one from PTSI is here to say, that there should never be guardianships. Of course, there are times when guardianship is appropriate. What we are concerned about is times when people are put in guardianships that they don't need, what I call overbroad or undue guardianships. Guardianships that take away more rights than they should, or that take away rights from people who can exercise them. Because here is something, again, that we know from study after study, that even though the laws in almost all the states, including Virginia, say that guardianship should only be used as a last resort and should only be used when nothing else has worked to empower the person and should only take away those rights a person truly cannot exercise. What we know is that over 90% of guardianships take away all rights. We call those full or plenary guardianships. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of guardianship if that's what a person truly needs. But if a person is able to exercise his or her rights, or is able to exercise some rights, to take away all of the person's rights is dangerous. Because when we take away all rights in a full or a plenary guardianship, what happens is we have someone with incredible power over someone's life. Power going into the most intimate areas of a person's life, where they live, what they do, who they see, whether they work, whether they get health care. And that can be dangerous. Because just like we know that self-determination is the key to a good life, that people who make more decisions have better lives, we also know, we also have almost 50 years of studies that say that when people lose self-determination, their lives get worse. We knew as far back in 1975 that when people lose self-determination, when they lose their right to make choices, they feel helpless, hopeless, and self-critical. The rest of the sentence on your screen is they will not, quote, behave because they see no point in behaving. Another study found that when people with disabilities lost their rights to make decisions, they felt worse. They had lower self-esteem. They were more passive. They wouldn't try new things because they felt like failures. And that's not rocket science, is it? If I told you again and again and again that you can't do something, would you feel particularly motivated to try? Would you feel like you were very good at making decisions or very good at being a human being? Of course you wouldn't. So this is a problem that we have known about for decades. Up on your screen is a quote from Congress. This quote is from 1987. In 1987, the House Committee on Aging, chaired by a congressman named Claude Pepper from Florida, conducted the first investigational hearings on guardianship. They talked to guardians, they talked to people under guardianship, they reviewed guardianship laws, they reviewed studies about guardianship. And what you're looking at on your screen right now is literally page 1, paragraph 1 of their findings. Look at it with me. Look at the bold words. The typical ward, person under guardianship, has fewer rights than a typical convicted felon. When people are under guardianship, particularly the overbroad and undue guardianships that we're concerned about, what we have is someone with so much power to decide where people live, what they do, whether they get medical care, and as Congress found, in sometimes when they die. It is, in one short sentence, the most punitive civil penalty that can be levied against an American citizen. And the rest of that sentence is, except for the death penalty. So where can we go from here? As I said, we have no concerns about guardianship when it's right. Of course, there are times when guardianship is appropriate. When a person is so disabled they cannot take part in the decision-making process at all, of course, guardianship is appropriate. If a person doesn't want to take part in the decision-making process and is putting his or her health at risk, of course, guardianship is appropriate. In emergency situations, when there is no one available, of course, a temporary guardianship might be appropriate. So I and PTSI are not here to say there should never be guardianships. But what we are here to say is there should never be guardianships just because you have a disability, or just because you're a certain number of years old, or just because you need help. Or the two at the bottom of your screen that really get me worried, because that's the way it's always been, and because it's for your own good. That's when I hear across the country, someone needs a guardian for their own good. And we hear that even though we have so many studies that show that making choices and keeping self-determination is actually in your own good. And the science and studies are scary. We know that people under overbroad and undue guardianships can experience significant negative impacts on their life. They feel less well. They live less long. They function less well. When on the other hand, we know that people with disabilities who have more self-determination have better quality of life, more independence, and more community integration. And I have to tell you, the number one reason I hear for guardianship is to keep people safe. And I will tell you this, I have never questioned a parent, I've never questioned a person, and no one should, who wants to keep their son or daughter safe. It is the first responsibility of every parent. But what I do talk about is science. And up on your screen is one of the most important studies, I think, from a professor named Ishita Kemka in New York. What Dr. Kemka looked at was the relationship between self-determination and safety. She did a classic study where she worked with women with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And if you don't know this, you should. Women with intellectual and developmental disabilities are far more likely to be abused or neglected than any other segment of the population, physically, emotionally, sexually. It's horrible. So what Dr. Kemka did was she worked with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, women. And she worked, I call it an apples to apples study. I'm not a scientist. What I mean is that she worked with women with similar abilities and limitations. And she divided them up into two groups. There was one group called the control group that she said, go live your lives. The second group, called an experimental group, she gave access to a curriculum designed to improve their self-determination, to teach them about decision-making, to encourage them to take more control over their lives. When the curriculum was done, she brought the two groups back together and she gave them a recognized test designed to measure how well people can recognize potentially abusive situations. You know what she found? Apples to apples, remember. The women with more self-determination were better able to recognize potentially abusive situations and therefore better able to avoid them. In other words, they were safer. I have told parents and judges across this country, if you want to keep people safe, don't take away their rights. Build their abilities. And again, that's not rocket science. Aren't you more protective of things that you know are yours? If you know it's your life, your body, your choice, you're going to be less likely to let someone take that away, won't you? And this is what I call the cherry on top of the sundae, this particular study I'm showing you right now, called the National Core Indicator Study. The National Core Indicator Study was done across the country. It was looked at the quality of life of people with disabilities, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. What it looked at was the impact of certain variables on quality of life, how certain things impacted people's lives. And again, this was an apples to apples study. It even used the old names, mild, moderate, and severe disabilities. So it compared people with mild disabilities to people with mild disabilities, moderate, moderate, severe, severe. They looked at a whole bunch of different things and how they impacted people's quality of life. One of the things they looked at was whether or not a person had a guardian. And what they found in Virginia and across the country was the same thing over and over. People who do not have guardians were more likely to work, live independently, have friends other than paid staff, go on dates and socialize in the community, and practice the religion of their choice. The results were so amazing. They redid the study a couple of years later, found the same thing. People without guardians, apples to apples, were more likely to have independence, have their own place, more likely to date and socialize in the community, more likely to have their rights respected. So what I tell people is, if we know that the one thing standing in between having what you see on your screen and not having what you see on your screen may well be having a guardian, doesn't it mean that 1,500 years of assuming that guardianship is the only option are enough? Doesn't it mean that we should think before we jump to guardianship? And here's where we can discuss a way forward. Here's where we can discuss supported decision-making, because I believe, and we've seen across the country, so many others do, that supported decision-making is a way forward. So what's supported decision-making? Well, there's a definition on your screen. There's a definition that you will see in textbooks and in articles that says that supported decision-making is a recognized alternative to guardianship, through which people with disabilities use friends, family members, and professionals to help them understand the situations and choices they face so they may make their own decision without the need for a guardian. I can recite that almost perfectly because I wrote it. You'll see my name on your screen there. And now that you've seen it, and now that you know I've wrote it, I hope you'll forget it because I think it's a terrible definition. If you really want to know what supported decision-making is, ask yourself how you make decisions. Ask yourself what you do if you don't know what to do. What do you do when the doctor speaks medical jargon at you? What do you do when you're faced at work or at home with a completely new subject that you've never experienced before? What do you do if you're so close to an issue you know that you shouldn't be making decisions without help? You get help, don't you? You ask the doctor to explain things in plain language. You call a friend who knows about that topic. You go to a coworker who knows about the situation you're facing and who may have faced it before. And that's what supported decision-making is. It's getting the help you need to do the things you have to do so you can make the decisions you have to make. And if you think about it, we all use supported decision-making. We don't call it that, but we've been all doing it all our lives. And in fact, we are expected to use it. Think about all the cliches we have about making decisions. Things like, don't make a snap judgment, or don't go off half-cocked, or get a second opinion. My dad always used to say, measure twice and you only have to cut once. They all mean the same thing. Get help, get a second opinion, get advice, ask for help, use supported decision-making. And when we do, we are complimented. We are told that we are making informed choices. We are told that we are not making snap judgments. We are told that we are wise or judicious or good teammates in the office. That's what supported decision-making is. The people in our lives support us however we need to be supported, whether it's information or advice or just someone to listen to, so that we can make the decisions we have to make. So what that means to me is this. Before seeking guardianship, before assuming that guardianship is the only option, 98% of the time, what we should be doing is asking a very simple question. Before we assume that people cannot make decisions in their lives, we should ask this question. What else have you tried? What else have you tried to empower that person to make decisions? What have we done to encourage that person to develop the skills and get the supports they need to make decisions? And that's just not my position. That is the position of the National Guardianship Association. The National Guardianship Association, or NGA, is a group made up of guardians, by guardians, for guardians. Their website is guardianship.org. They train guardians. They have a code of ethics for guardians. There is no one more invested in guardianship than the NGA. And this is what they say. Before guardianship, try something else. Try supported decision-making. Try to empower the person. It might work. It might not. If it doesn't work, guardianship may well be appropriate. But given all of the benefits that we know that come from self-determination, why wouldn't we try first? And that's because supported decision-making can do for people with disabilities what it does for everyone else. Now, people with disabilities may need different kinds of supports, may need more intense supports, may need supports for a longer period of time. They may not, but they might. But the principle is the same. When they get what they need, they may well be able to make the decisions they have to make. And it works the same way it works for you. Having a supporter helps us all understand and clarify our issues. You know, sometimes it helps us to talk it out. It helps focus our attention on the important things, helps us weigh our options, the pros and the cons. It helps us make sure that the decisions we are making are well-informed and not snap judgments. That's what we all do when we use supported decision-making in our lives. And here's something that you already know. You may not know you know it, but you already know this. There isn't one way to do it. Supported decision-making is not a one-size-fits-all thing. So you can't ask me, what are the 5 most important steps, or what is the one thing we have to do? Because there isn't one. Because like you already know, we all make decisions differently. We all need different types of support. The way that I need support is very different from the way that you need support. The things that I need support doing are very different from the things that you need support doing. So there's so many ways we can do this. Some people just need an ear to listen to or a shoulder to lean on, that kind of informal support where we talk it out. Some of us have what I call go-to people. People who we go to for particular things. My sister is an educational professional. When one of my sons is having issues in school, she's the first person I call. I have another sister who is a healthcare professional. When I am concerned about medicines or symptoms, she is the first person I call. I have another friend who knows about cars. So when I am confused about whether I am getting ripped off by the mechanic, he is the first person I call. And for people with disabilities, we can put go-to people into their powers of attorney or their individualized education plans or their individualized plans for employment or their individualized service plans. Some people like broad-based, what are sometimes called micro boards or circles of support, a very formal situation where I name particular people who I want to meet with at regular occasions so that we can all talk together and I can tell them about what's going on in my life and they can give me advice. Well, all of these things are supported decision-making because all of them involve me asking you for help so that I can get information and advice and I can make the decision myself that I need to make thanks to your support. And what we know, remember how I told you that self-determination is the key to a good life for people with disabilities. What we are knowing and finding out as study after study comes in is that people who use supported decision-making are more self-determined. And that's also not rocket science, is it? If I am getting support from you to make decisions for myself, I'm going to have more control over my life and make more decisions than if I'm in a guardianship and someone else is making decisions for me. So if we are more self-determined, then what we know is people who have better qualities of life. And the research backs that up. There was a study that I was part of in Virginia just this year, 2021, as I'm talking to you, where we worked with young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities all across the spectrum of abilities. And we empowered them to use supported decision-making. We didn't tell them there was only one way to do it. We told them all about supported decision-making. We worked with their parents, we worked with their friends, and told them that they should create a plan that works well for them. They should set up a system where they have supporters in a way that works best, that allows them to make decisions. And we saw incredible creativity. We saw people make spreadsheets. I had one young woman in the program came in with a chart that she wrote where she said, this says what I want to do, this says who I want to help me, and this says how I want them to help me. That's it. And I said, my goodness, that is it, because that's what supported decision-making is. You know what we did after they set those things up? We followed them for the better part of a year. We would talk to them regularly. We talked to their supporters. We talked to their families. We asked them all the same types of questions to collect data. And here's what we found out, that the ones that used supported decision-making to make their own decisions were more independent, more confident. They were better at making decisions. And according to themselves and their supporters and their families, they made better decisions. And even in the middle of a pandemic, most of them said they were doing more things and meeting more people. So again, if we know that supported decision-making can enhance quality of life, shouldn't we at least think about it before leaping to guardianship? Now, the elephant in the room, the one that you're probably thinking is this. Well, if I do this, can you guarantee me my son or my daughter will be safe? The answer is no. There is no safety guarantee in this life. In fact, I will guarantee you that right now, as I'm speaking, someone in this world, whether they have a disability or not, is being led astray by someone they trust. But here's what I also know. As I'm speaking to you in September of 2021, there's never been a study that I know of that has found that people are inherently safer or have an inherently better quality of life when they're in guardianship. In fact, there are horrific stories of guardianship abuse, people in guardianship being abused, including by their guardians. That's not to say guardianship is wrong or that guardians are bad. It's to say that some people are bad. So if we know that people are not, quote unquote, safe anywhere or anytime, what I would do is I would at least try the one that's correlated with safety. We know from the study I told you from Professor Kemke that people with more self-determination are safer. So wouldn't we try the thing that is correlated, associated with self-determination, which we know is supported decision-making? It's not a guarantee of safety, but it is, I think it is our best hope for our best quality of life if it works. And if it doesn't work, guardianship is always an option. So this is what I want to leave you with. Supported decision-making can empower people to be more self-determined and have a better quality of life, but only if we start from a place of respect for rights, respect for the right to make choices, respect and honor and protect everyone's right to make choices. Just like it says in the Declaration of Independence, we hold those truths to be self-evident, that we are all endowed with inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If we start there, then supported decision-making can empower people to achieve those things. And we know, and in the future on PTSI's website, we will be publishing brochures and guides for ways that you can use supported decision-making in your life and the life of your children, because you're going to learn that so many of the supports and services you're already receiving can be made better through supported decision-making. The student-led IEP in special education is a form of supported decision-making. Person-centered planning in Medicaid and Medicare and Medicaid waivers is a form of supported decision-making. Informed consent to medical care, informed choice in vocational rehabilitation, even end-of-life planning can be made better and more effective through supported decision-making. My name is Jonathan Martinez. It's been my honor to speak with you today. For more information, please check out PTSI's website, www.peatc.org. To learn more about supported decision-making, please visit the National Resource Center for Supported Decision-Making at supporteddecisionmaking.org. And if you want to get in contact with me, please email me. My email is jgmartin@syr.edu. It's been my honor. Thank you so much.